Hello and welcome to Big Weekend here on the Football365 show, brought to you by Paddy Power. I'm Mark Smith. I'm here, as ever, with Editor-in-Chief of Football365.com, Sarah Winterburn. A big weekend, as it always seems to be at the minute. We're going to be talking about sensible football. Is that coming back? We'll talk about United, Arsenal, and we'll talk about Liverpool Centre-Backs. I don't know what they're going to do. We talked about it last week, but it seems to have got even worse this time round. All of that plus much more coming up on the show. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to like and subscribe and also press the notification bell. That's all the admin done, I think. So all that's left to say is welcome to Big Weekend, brought to you by Paddy Power. Right, Sarah, let's start with sensible football. Is this a big weekend for the return of normal, civilised football?
It did seem like it, didn't it? Last weekend was a little bit of a damp squib. When none of these 6-goal, 7-goal, 8-goal, 9-goal. There was even a 0-0. I mean, what on earth is that about? Rubbish. Both now back both teams not to score in every game. That's now the bet.
Yeah, and that was the biggest game of the weekend as well. We saw a proper throwback 0-0 compared to what we've been seeing recently. There's 1-1s, there's 2-1, there's 1-0, 0-0s. Is this a case of people just settling down into a rhythm? What's the reason for this? I think
there's a couple of reasons. I think we're seeing, like you said, this is an odd season. It started very oddly. They didn't have a pre-season. A lot of managers went into this not quite knowing what their best team was because, you know, this fella had 2 weeks rest, this fella had 4 weeks rest. We don't really know what we're doing. And so the season's taken a little bit of settling down. And also there's an adjustment, isn't there? I think everyone was giddy, weren't they, the first few weeks. But actually, what managers then look at that and say, wait a minute, if we can stop those goals going in, actually we've got a massive advantage here. So I think there's been a sort of overwriting of it in that, you're starting to think if we can have the best defence, we'll it's worth so many points a season if we can just stop the goals going in. Yeah. But unfortunately, they all thought it at the same time. So we ended up with 0-0s and 1-0s and 1-1s. It was almost like everybody thought, wait a minute, I can sneak an advantage here. And then everybody stopped and the fun stopped.
The fun did stop. I mean, there's been so many goals so far this season. I think it's going to pick up again and go mad. I don't think this weekend necessarily, but I think around Christmas time, I mean, traditionally players at that sort of time of the season, they're all knackered anyway.
You generally get some mad old scorelines at Christmas anyway. Yeah. You generally get some mad old scorelines when they're playing 2 or 3 times a week. We may well return to that, but I think now we're going to come into this quite a settled period, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's move on then. We've mentioned there defending and how important that could be and what an edge you might have this season if you can actually defend. Let's talk about Liverpool. We mentioned this last week. But they've now got more issues at centre-back. Fabinho's now out. We don't know how long for yet. But that is is it ridiculous to say that's a bigger loss now, given the situation, than the Van Dijk one?
Yes, if you take the domino effects of it, I think Van Dijk was a massive blow, but then you think, oh, well, at least we've got Fabinho, and at least he can come back. And yes, it does weaken that midfield. But he's not a Van Dijk, but he's 85% of a Van Dijk, which is a hell of a lot of footballer. It's certainly better than almost every team in the Premier League has got. And then you lose Fabinho, and we're now down to, we're not sure about Joel Matip. He never seems to be fit enough for long. He's never fit enough for long enough. There's a great stat that he hasn't started a Liverpool defeat for, I think, something like 2.5 years. But the truth is, he's only played about 8 times, so it's a rubbish stat. But
it's like I've also not lost for Liverpool. Who cares?
No, neither have I. I've been absolutely exquisite. Never missed a pass. Won every header.
Yeah,
phenomenal.
Absolutely, and congratulations to you for that.
Without him, they literally just have Joe Gomez, and we know from watching Joe Gomez the last couple of years. He's not Mr. Consistent. He does have little brain farts, and those brain farts don't mean as much when you've got Virgil van Dijk next to you. He might sweep them up. They might not mean as much when you've got Fabinho next to you, because he will sweep them up. They'll mean a hell of a lot more if you've got Reece Williams next to you.
So sweeping up brain farts, is that what we're talking about on the show today?
That's what we're talking about.
Liverpool do score a lot of goals against West Ham, so I think that they will just rely on that for this one, at least.
Yeah, the front three will be back, won't they, after having a rest in midweek? And you'd fancy that this may be a return to a sort of early season excitement of 3-2, 4-3, but I think I would still expect Liverpool to win this game.
Yes, I agree. My pick for this one, if you're asking, which you should be, is I'm going to go both teams to score. I think Liverpool will definitely score, and I just fancy West Ham at the minute. Liverpool don't look great at the back, and they're quite fun to watch going forward. Very wise. Let's move on. Number 3, this is for a mid-table clash, this is a big one, isn't it? Man United against Arsenal.
So Man United, Arsenal. Yeah, we'll write 16 conclusions on this weekend, and everyone will say, "Why are you doing 16 conclusions? It's a mid-table clash, the two massive teams." And the worry here, isn't it, that it turns into what Man United Chelsea turned into, that it becomes we must not lose rather than trying to win this game. That's the massive worry here, especially with Mikel Arteta and the way he's been managing Arsenal. It is a very much in an ultra cautious way. This is not an Arsenal team that is going to get battered by Man United or Liverpool or Man City or anybody. But are they an Arsenal team who are going to sort of sweep Man United away, or have the confidence to sweep Man United away? Certainly after the Leicester result as well. It could be a real dull one, couldn't it? And pray God that it isn't. But yeah, I've not got high hopes.
I think this one's going to be more interesting than the Chelsea one. The United-Chelsea was interesting for different reasons. It also wasn't exciting, was it? But the United-Arsenal one, I think Arsenal, like a lot of teams at the minute, are looking for that right balance. And now Thomas Partey's in there, and on the ball, Arsenal look a great team when he's on the ball and they've got movement off him. I just think he's a really brilliant player to have brought in.
They've got to get used to him, and he's got to get used to them, and
yes,
that doesn't happen instantaneously. It might happen instantaneously for a striker who's basically might come from a different country, get 3 chances, take 2, because at the end of the day, the finish is the same job, isn't it? Whatever league you're in. But for a central midfielder, it's very different. He's going to be the fulcrum of a team, and you don't walk straight in to be the fulcrum of a team, I'm afraid. So as we're waiting to hopefully click into gear this weekend, it would be a massive win if they beat Man United, and also would plunge United into another sort of mini crisis.
You're going to go crisis? Yeah.
Mini crisis?
You're probably
right. I don't know, they avoided it with the Chelsea. It was like they both avoided not to go into crisis, Man United and Chelsea.
And that's what they went into the game hoping for.
It was almost like they had a little shaky handy before and went, let's not have a really long week in crisis, and they decided that 0-0 was absolutely fine. I don't think Mikel Arteta would go for the same deal.
Yeah, well, let's wait and see. Number 4 this week, we're going to talk about Frank Lampard's new look defensive Chelsea. Now, they're away at Burnley. I'm going to go with Chris Wood to score any time.
He looked really good against Tottenham, didn't he? And Burnley were really unlucky not to get something out of that game. And, that was a slog. And Burnley could well turn this one into a slog as well. If they sit deep enough, Chelsea are going to struggle to break them down. And yet they'll still commit men forward. Then they've got that long ball, haven't they, to Chris Wood. And they could do big damage there and really set back this Chelsea side. Chelsea could afford to go into that Man United game in the same way that they could afford to go into the last game, the first game of the Champions League game, Champions League group stage, knowing that a 0-0 would be fine. You can't go to Burnley thinking a 0-0 is going to be fine, because that's a problem in itself. So they're going to have.
That's how you get undone.
They're going to have to be more ambitious, and ambition means pushing people forward. And we know that they struggle if they do push people forward, because they do get caught quite a lot without any real semblance of a plan, as far as I can work out.
Yeah, and huge pressure on Lampard to play his big signing new boys, isn't there?
There is, and certainly.
So it's not like
certainly in a game like this. I mean, you can play against Man United, or like say in the Champions League, and think you get to be a little bit savvy and not put them all out and do it. But if you're playing Burnley, we're going to expect to see Kai Havertz. We're going to expect to see Timo Werner. We need to see a bit more of Hakim Ziyech as well. And a 0-0 won't be any good there at either end of the pitch. That won't scream a new beginning for Chelsea.
No, I mean, I sort of feel like I don't want to even watch this game, but there we go, I will do. Number 5, we'll talk about the first 6-pointer of the season. I love a 6-pointer, but another game I'm not really that bothered about watching. Fulham, West Brom, clash of the Titans. Who's going to come away with the 3 points here? Or will it be what I think, a very boring draw?
It's going to be a 6-pointer where only 2 points are going to be won, isn't it? And so many of those 6 points are exactly like that, where no one actually wants all those points or is prepared to gamble for all those points. You won't find many people who don't think that these two teams are going to go down now. And as ridiculous as that sounds, when we're not even at the end of October, but those two teams are going to go down. Yeah. And
yes,
and there's no great shame in that, but. It's more a case of how much of a fight they can put up. We saw Fulham put putting up a little bit more of a fight the week before last. Then they crumbled against Palace. West Brom got a point at least. I think they will do okay. They'll just get enough points, won't they? Not to survive. I don't mean that, but in terms of not being an absolute embarrassment. But no, I won't be watching this one either.
Wow, very, very harsh. West Brom, I think. I mean, we've talked about Diangana, talked about Pereira before. Really good.
I mean, the signing of Carlin Grant is big for them. I think, I've seen Carlin Grant a lot, obviously, as a Huddersfield Town fan, and he is a great finisher. And he ended up being Huddersfield Town's biggest top scorer the season he joined in January. So that shows you he can score goals in the Premier League. He's not one of these players who's kind of a championship player who's then going to struggle when he goes to the top flight. We already know he can score goals, and he's already off the mark. He will score a few goals. He'll get into double figures, which will probably be the difference between West Brom finishing dead 20th and being in at least a fight for 17th as we go into the last month. I still don't expect them to win it, but I think West Brom signing Carlin Grant might well elongate their season at least.
Yeah, well, I'm going for a draw in that game, as you'd imagine. Final topic of this week, Sarah. Leeds-Leicester. I'm very excited, conversely, about this game. Two teams I'm really enjoying watching. Leicester seem to have got into some sort of semblance of last season, or the first half of last season again. Talk us through this one.
There's no one who isn't enjoying Leeds play at the moment, isn't it? And I include myself on that, even though I'm about as far from a Leeds fan as you'll get, but they are extraordinarily interesting to watch, and the level that they play at in comparison to the sort of the cost of that team and how the experience of that team at this kind of level. They're playing in a way that other teams have come here and come to the Premier League, spent 5 or 6 years here and never quite got to that level, and never always quite felt like they were settling in, whereas this Leeds team seems to have settled in straight away. Patrick Bamford's surprised us all, hasn't he? Who knew he was an actual goal scorer, which is astonishing.
Hat-trick scorer. What happened with Leeds last season, and I think a little bit the season before, was that they got to the incredibly busy period of the season, around sort of Christmas, just after Christmas, and the nature of their play, the way they press so high and are such full of energy, they fell off a little bit over that period. Do you see something like that happening again this season? Or do you think they've got more strength in depth now?
There may well be a fall off. I don't think we're going to see anything dramatic because the Premier League isn't quite as intense as the Championship. The way that they play in the Championship is literally two games a week, every week. More often than not. And the Premier League, although we're seeing sort of a quite crowded fixture list at the moment, we're still only seeing sort of one game a week at most weeks, and they're not going to make any investment at all in domestic cups. So all they've got to do is turn up for 38 games a season. And at the moment they're doing that. And I think, will they drop off? Probably. Will they end up mid-table? Probably. But Leeds-Leicester is a great fixture. I do like this Leicester side, and they're looking good at the moment, even without a couple of players who I would consider their most important players, and Didi for one, who I absolutely love. They're having to sort of double down in that centre of the midfield because they don't have him. But the way they played against Arsenal, incredibly defensively, incredibly deep, knowing. We all knew it, didn't they? Vardy would, as soon as Vardy came off the bench, you thought he would win the game.
Yeah, easy.
And, you'd fancy him again, and they will go to Leeds, and they will let Leeds have the ball most of the time, I imagine. And yet you would.
And I'm going with that as that's my pick for this game. I'm going to go with a Leicester away win. I mean, I think it's a very tough place to go, Leeds, but I just fancy Leicester at the minute. I think Vardy looks like he's back in some sort of top level fitness, and I think they'll go and do it. Right, Sarah, that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you very much for joining me as ever. Thank you guys at home for watching. You might have noticed I did the four tips there. If you want to back all 4 tips and make it into a 4-way accumulator, you can do that. And if you get 3 of the 4 right, i.e. you just lose one of those, Paddy Power will refund you by way of a free bet. Good lads, Paddy Power. Good lads, Sarah Winterburn. Good lads for watching. This has been Big Weekend, brought to you by Paddy Power. Until next week, goodbye.
Bye-bye.